I think this idea of zigging and zagging helps us to adapt quickly. I'll give you a perfect example in my experience at Illuma. On the heels of Complete Speech, I founded Illuma with a business partner. And within 3 months, realized that that business partner with a full-time job and everything wasn't as interested in what we were doing. And as a result, we were not making progress. So what was the zig? We had to have a hard conversation. And I ended up buying him out for $12,000, which at the time was an enormous sum of money. And we parted ways. What did that do? It accelerated my ability to start experimenting and iterating. And even though the vision was build a company that was doing telehealth in schools, I didn't have money to build a technology. So the zag at that point was call as many schools as I could in Utah and staff, call therapists and say, I have a position, and then call schools and place them, right? And that was the zag so that I could cash flow. And as that cash flow started to build up, I could invest. And now I'm zigging back to technology and I'm saying, let's invest in some technology. So there is a route of VC funding, and it's appropriate for certain people and mentalities and businesses. Also on the organic funding side, those zigs and zags can feel like huge decisions, almost like betraying your original vision of where you're going. If I'm headed here, how can I possibly say I'm going to staff? And that's not what I'm doing. How will my investors think about that? But that is oftentimes the only way to pivot as we go toward our ultimate goal at the end of the day.
I love it. Yes, I think the founders needs to realize those zigzags are okay. Sometimes like we create stories in our head like, oh, Netflix, Netflix didn't do DVD rentals but they did, right? So they had their own zigzag at the moment, even though the name of the company, but Netflix, so ultimate goal has always been streaming online, but they did sell DVDs.
Yeah.
And they needed to.
Hey,
there's lots of examples.
Yeah. So I'm also going to say this. I also believe that many of our listeners need to understand that raising funds is not the only definition of success.
Mm-hmm.
Two components. You can succeed organically, and my VC friends have said, if you can do it without our monies, do it. You have more control, you have all of that. Number two, it's also a mentality, especially in this tech space, that everything has to do with being funded at multiple rounds at higher valuations, and that's success. And I think that's also faulty. For they have pounded the chest and said, hey, what happened? We succeeded. We closed a round. Great. I'd rather you tell me that you have customers who are paying you and they want to pay more and more for your product or service versus you closed a round. And there's a little bit of a unhealthy spotlight on those who've got funding and the belief that that's the definition of success. I don't believe that. But again, the software, SaaS, it's small incremental charge. There's no front loading. It takes a lot to be able to pay for all those engineers, and hence money is needed. What are your thoughts, both of you? What are your thoughts on this topic?
Go, Jeremy, go for it.
Well, I'm a little bit biased to funding without VC or outside capital. I think that maintaining control allows you to be much more agile. I think trying to generate a revenue stream and cash to fund development is important because you can take the time to stay close to customers. When fundraising, a lot of people call it the VC drug. And I think the reason people call it the VC drug is for the reason that once you take the money, now you spend a ton of time rolling up reports, having to manage how you spend that money. You have to make sure that you're reporting back and having all those conversations. You lose some control, and it can feel like you have to prepare for the next round in order for that VC to get their exit. That's a big distraction. And if customers are really the driver of the business and meeting their needs, with a large distraction, you can miss a lot of important details. Also, when you are pulled away from the customer as the founder too early, you lose a pulse on the market need, the market problem that got you there in the first place. So we have to use a lot of discipline to stay really close to the customer and to stay involved in building for the needs. And if that means I've got to figure out how to generate cash before I can actually build the product exactly how I want it, then so be it. And I think that's true whether it's the VC funded or organically funded. Like you said, oftentimes we're too eager to pound our chest and say, look at me, I raised a bunch of money, I have an office, I hired a bunch of people, I've spent all this money, I'm successful. But unfortunately, it's like the emperor with no clothes. I don't want to be the emperor with no clothes. I want to be able to really deliver value.
Ike, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I think I don't want to oversimplify things, because when I oversimplify it, we're going to lose a lot of context. It really depends on the situation. So the founder needs to be able to gauge all these factors to make a decision for themselves. I'll start with the VCs. There are a few principles. Like if the benefit that you're going to bring to the customers and the problem you're going to solve require a lot of hardware and a lot of capital, and there's no way to do that. I know, like in Utah, I met a hardware company. They're doing some energy solutions for the homes and buildings, the commercial companies. That requires a lot of capital, and there's no way to do that. I built my first startup by working as a freelancer and make money from that. You can't fund a hardware company like that. Like, impossible, right? There's that. There's another one, Bino, I think you taught me this. If you have a business, you proved your product helps a lot of people, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to make money for the people you support, whether it's a board, employees, investors, whatever. If you find your position where if you had $1, you can turn that into $3. Every $1 you can bring $3, whatever it is, like marketing, expression sales, or geographies. That, like, you have to bring the money from the VCs. It just doesn't make sense. That is not a good business decision not to bring a VC in that way. But on the opposite side, right? If you say, oh, I have an idea, I haven't talked to any customer yet, I don't even know if this works, I'm just going to go raise some money and then build it with somebody else's money. And at the end, even if I succeed, I'm going to have 3% of the company when we exit. That doesn't make sense either, right? So you if you can fund your early days and build your product and prove your product with your customers' money, that's the best, because they will do it. And then you can decide where is there a good outcome here for me and the investors if I bring investors. If not, don't. Right? If there's a good outcome for both, then you can. So I think that's what I would advise. Rather than VC is good, VC is bad, bootstrapping is good, bootstrapping is bad. It depends on the situation of the product, where the founder is, where the market is. If you're attacking a brand new market versus you're going after the incumbents, right? Things depends.
I agree so much that it depends, Ike. And at a certain point, it makes a lot of sense. I think what you're describing is smart money and if it's, I have to raise money because that's how everyone else does it, there's not enough substance to that. But if I'm doing it because spending $1 makes 3, then I have a formula and I can still maintain, you know, a level of control. I think that there's a very important principle that is underlying all of this. And constrained resources, whether it's time, it's money, it's people, really promotes better innovation. When our back is up against the wall and we have to do something, there's no other way out. Human minds do incredible things. And it's not always just about having money that makes it successful. It's constraining our resources to use them to promote innovation.
Yeah. In the journey that I had and the example that I brought up, Jeremy, there was a startup where I actually figured out the math formula that if I put $1 into the marketing machine, sales would be able to output 3x.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible opportunity. I knew it was a small window of time, and we had to get outside money because it was a proven formula. It was so good. It's a rare thing. Most people go and get the money to bring the idea to fruition. If we could bring money in when we've got a proven formula, then everybody wins. You reduce the dilution, you have more ownership control, more influence and power than begging because you have to meet payroll. There's a big difference. And so that's, again, there is a great use of strategic money to accelerate. And the most expensive is to prove an idea. And that's how we always.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I've taken money. I went out and brought in a PE firm. I think it's the stage that we're also talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is it early? Do I have an unproven idea? Do I need to sit with this and take more time before I raise money? If we're in a growth stage, do I have a formula that by pouring gasoline on the fire, that fire will grow instead of extinguish? You know, I made that decision too. I brought on a financial sponsor. I'm very happy with that. It took 10 years to bring on a financial sponsor. Some might say that was a 10-year overnight success because people don't see those 10 years, right? And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Illuma, particularly since it was your last successful business, what are some of the things you learned from there that you could advise our listeners and viewers on some of the, I learned that again, or that's a good learning. What would you share with the audience here?
Bino, I don't know if we have enough time for all of this. Oh man, I think the thing that stands out the most as we talk about this is it's not nearly as hard as I thought it would be. It's much harder. And I mean, it's just the truth.
Yeah.
Because, you know, keep in mind that I chose the route of doing it through a bootstrapped approach. And my reasoning for that was K-12 are not fast adopters. They're laggards in many ways. The public school system is a bureaucracy. There's lots of layer of decision making. And so doing it in a bootstrapped way not only extended the time frame, but schools in and of themselves, their purchasing process extended the time frame. And so, you know, being patient, and you call it, how do I know if this is going to succeed or not? I was 4 years in working a full-time job at AppTask, which is now Workfront. And I was sitting with my father-in-law at their house. My wife, Natalie, was in the room. I was at my wit's end. I've spent 4 years on this thing. How do I know to keep going or not? Now keep in mind, we're making hundreds of thousands in revenue, but not enough for me to go full-time, not enough for me to really dedicate energy to it. And he looked at me and he said, you know the answer, and I believe in you. And you know what happened in that moment is all this like confusing energy ended in clarity, which was, you're right, I'm not done. And within a year, I quit my job, went full-time, and then a whole nother, a whole nother era of issues and problems. So in 2000, I'm going to mess up the year, but I'll say 2016, because I think that's the year. That was the year of the revenue crisis. I had just gone full time a few months prior. We had just enough to pay ourselves a living, meager living. And we had some sales reps that had brought in, I mean, it was a massive amount of money, guys, $800,000 in new sales. And I thought, let's go hire people to support this. We're doing this. And that was in the spring of 2016. By August and September, $500,000 of that had reneged on their contracts. I can't tell you the gravity of crisis we faced in our little world. I had to lay off engineers. I had to lay off support people. It was traumatizing for me and for other people. It was the biggest crisis I had felt in my life at that time. And because, like I said earlier, I was so entangled with my business and personal identity, I felt like my life was ending. And I don't say this lightly, but I seriously considered taking my own life, thinking if I'm not here, I won't have to own up to these problems and address these. That was in about November of 2026 or 2016. In December, a light shined through and I had a ray of hope. And I mean, of all people, it was Tony Robbins, and it was a podcast, and he was talking about the belief cycle and success. And it just, guys, I know it's so simple, but it changed my mindset. And a little R&D project that we had started earlier in 2016, which we thought was nothing, became the saving grace. We were operating on a contract that was really flimsy. It was hourly. Schools could renege. There was no real commitment. But this thing that we were experimenting with in kind of a research basis was a subscription-based model. Now, in 2016, that was not very standard practice in schools for a tech-enabled service. So it felt like we were on Mars. Well, after talking with sales team members and engineers, I remember Chad, I love that guy, and George, and we were talking about, well, what do we do? And I said, guys, I need you to get on board with this. And they were like, I don't get it, but we'll try. And we burned the boats like Cortez did. And we decided this is the business model. We're forsaking the hourly, the contracted model that we had done. And in January, I'm not joking, within a month, we turned our ships, we turned our focus, and we started to sell a subscription, and we started to migrate our existing contracts to subscription. By the time June rolled around, we had increased our gross margin by double digits. We had added a significant amount of revenue, and they were on contracts that were subscription based. So there's no doubt that meant the schools couldn't renege. It was a commitment. And that was the beginning of a new phase. So when I talk about how innovation comes in crisis, I mean it, I know it. Like when you're up against a wall and you're facing failure straight in the face and you have no other options yet to innovate, it's as scary as all get out. It feels like life and death, but there's a way out.
Awesome.
That was you mentioned something very deep there. You really did have a dark moment where you considered taking your life because it got that dark. Mm-hmm. That's some serious stuff. And we're so glad that you fought through it, innovated out of it, got hope, whether it was from Tony Robbins or whatever. So grateful, right? And now you have a beautiful
I appreciate
family.
That.
Yeah.
Because at the next, that was the darkest, but at the next darkest point in the evolution of my role as a CEO and a founder, I actually met Binoy. And as an executive coach, you helped me to regain more than that I lost. So it's kind of this, it's this, learning is not a linear path. It's this ebb and flow. We have high moments and we have valley moments. And I think as long as that trajectory stays on a positive trend, we're doing good.
Yeah. Yeah. You smooth out the ups and downs and look at it going to the right and up. That's all we're looking for, just continuous effort. Yeah. It's incredible, the journeys that we all take. And you were and continue to be the most humble, hardworking guy out there. So you just have to work your way through it. I wrote down, innovation comes from crisis. There's too many. After a while, they just become, another crisis. Oh, another crisis. But the newbies, they're like, what is going on? And we just go, right? We just go, I remember that conversation with Ike too.
Of course.
Yep.
It's okay. It'll be fine. It'll pass.
But you're never dismissing it. You're never taking it lightly, because it could be life-threatening for the company, catastrophic. But you try to spend a lot less time in the fear zone. You try to snap out of it, and then like, okay, I'm gotta focus on fixing the problem and rallying the troops to help you fix the problem.
Yeah.
100%. If I may, a thought on that is the fear is so personal early on. And I had crises up to that point in 2016, but nothing to that level. And because everything was so personal, I couldn't disentangle my emotion with the feeling of what was happening. And, as you build capacity through experience, I think what you're saying, Ike, is so important, because rather than feeling fear, we can approach the situation deliberately and see it accurately. This is a business crisis. This is not a personal crisis. I treat it with importance. I approach it accurately with good judgment, and we rally around it. And I know we'll get through it. Don't know how long it will take.
Yeah, but the thing is, like all of us here on this call, we had over and over and over these cycle crisis, right? And then now we can sit and say, okay, this is another crisis. This is a business problem, not me problem. Is it even possible for a new founder not feel the weight of the world? Like, can that be coached, or does it just they have to live through it and then learn? Can we ease it, or just we're gonna have to find out how you built? So what do we say? What is there a problem? Is there a solution to this problem?
Yeah, I think the solution is that good judgment comes through experience, and experience only comes from poor judgment. So why would we remove those experiences from a new founder? As a new founder, I would not trade any of them. What I would do, though, is exactly what you said. I would go back and I would surround myself with people who I trust, and I would engage with advisors and coaching more formally. That's what I would have done, because there is something to be said about accelerating that learning curve. I would never suggest that someone should skip it, because that's so important. But can they accelerate? 100%.
I love that. I was going to say the same to Ike's question, which is a beautiful question. No, there is no replacement to the customized learning journey that every new business owner goes through. It is a required part of the success formula. My kids always say, "Hey, Dad, how come you know all of this stuff?" I says, "Because I made more mistakes than you." So that's it, right? So there is no way to go past it. You are signing up, hands raised, to say, "Bring on the pain. I'm going to start a business." Okay, good on you. Yeah, You're going to have some learning tolerances that you're going to figure out, that you are stronger than you thought, that you can take more hits than you believe you could. And in the end, you'll become that much more confident. And down the road, you'll be able to look at new challenges with a level of perspective that allows you to succeed and not be drawn into the drama of woe is me. So I feel very strongly you have to go through it.
Yeah.
But Jeremy, very wise, but get some help. You don't have to be lingering in that valley longer than necessary. Jettison yourself out with perspective and get help. But too much of it is, I got to do it on my own. I got to do it on my own. And that is unhealthy.
And that's what I did. It was very unhealthy. I would never do it that way again. I don't mind doing it. As a matter of fact, I have a high pain tolerance, which is partly why I'm an entrepreneur. But I would do it with people, with coaching, with sage advice, that I can get the perspective you're talking about.
Yeah, and for those founders, the symptoms are like you're going to feel fear of failure, fear of loss, because if you build somewhere and then the fear of loss, your health will degrade, your relationships will strain, you'll feel more isolation, right? Like all these things again, like I know I'm repeating, but it's okay to feel these, because this is how you're going to learn. This is how you're going to be a better leader, better CEO, whether it's this company or the next company. But pay. You can find out what's happening by a guide by you, right? And then recognize it better.
Do you mind if I share some
Sure.
firsthand experiences with that point?
Of course.
Since I stepped aside as CEO, I've gone back and become certified as a health and wellness coach. Not only because the company Illuma is a therapeutic company, but because the health and wellness was so important to me as a founder. It feels lonely and it can feel isolating, where everything stops with you, all decisions come to you, and most of the time it's always the hardest and most complex. And I coach founders and CEOs and executives now. I have found a pattern to what you're talking about. We talked about this before. And relationship with loved ones seems to be the most common issue that founders face. It's strange. I faced it, felt like my marriage was nearly at an end at certain points. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Another thing is our health. Our health just seems to deteriorate because we're so obsessive, whether that's gaining weight, eating like crap, not putting good things in our body. And on top of that, we feel like we're not really getting anything done productively. Those three things, universally common across all the clients that I have been coaching over the past year. And, I think it's important. I say that because I think it's important that everyone listening know that you're not alone. We all experience those same symptoms of building something. So building something and figuring out how to live well at the same time is important, because high performance, in my experience, is much more likely when we're not ignoring other aspects of our life.